So my name is Mark Williams-Thomas. I'm a former police detective and I'm now an investigator, and I work across lots of cases reviewing murder investigations, disappearances, and that's what's brought me here. I've been in contact with the family and they've specifically asked me, very gratefully, if I could come up and have a look. And Peter Fording is a very close friend of mine and we've worked very closely together over the last few days.
Having spent a few days in St Michael's, what is your opinion of what happened to Nicola? What is the most likely scenario?
Well, there are three hypotheses, not just one, there are three, and that is that Nicola came here and that she ended up in the water, which is of course has been the police's main hypothesis, but there are two others, that she left voluntarily on her own for whatever reason, things in her life, and the third one of course is the most sinister, that there was a third party involvement.
Looking at the police investigation, what mistakes do you think were made and what would you have done differently if you had been leading the investigation?
Well, I think there's two key elements here, and that is the media strategy and what's been going on behind the scenes by the senior investigating officer. There is no doubt that their strategy right from the very beginning was to deal with this as a high-risk missing person, and as a result they didn't treat this as a crime scene. What they looked at is trying to identify and find her as quickly as possible, and their theory quite clearly was that she ended up in the water either voluntarily or by accident. And no one's really speaking about it, but very clearly because of her high risk status they thought that she may well have taken her own life. The reality is though, is that could she have gone in this water and committed suicide? And what I would say is that that is almost impossible. How did she end up in a depth in the middle where she could end up dying? Because if she'd come down the side here, it's so short, so shallow, she couldn't have died.
How has Nicola's vulnerability affected the investigation?
Nicola's vulnerability has now become a major issue and it's very detrimental to the family. The family are now in turmoil. The last 24 hours for them have been horrific because the police decided yesterday to release that she was a high-risk misper. Why they decided to do it at that point, I really don't know. What they should have done is done it on day one. Get rid of all the speculation, dealt with it, had a very clear strategy with Paul, how they were going to deal with this. Nicola's got issues in her life. We all have issues in our life. That doesn't mean to say that she is any less vulnerable than anybody else, in terms of the process of what could have happened to her, i.e. third party. Now, I worry that there is a position that it's impacted so massively on the family. I also worry, of course, in relation to Nicola, if she is still alive, what's the impact on her to come back, say she was listening to this. But more significantly, the criticism the police have received gives us less confidence and faith in the police service, which is at an all-time low. They got this media strategy totally wrong, and I know that because I've spoken to them in the press department, and they acknowledge that. They've acknowledged they've made major failings. Their performance yesterday was shocking. Not only in the fact that they released that she was a high-risk misper at the press conference and then refused to explain what that was about. How did they think that they could release a piece of information like that and journalists, investigators weren't going to say, what are you talking about? And as that built up over the day, and when I spoke to the police yesterday, before lunch, and I said to them, listen, I've got information that something has gone on within the family environment, that there has been emergency service at the address. What are you going to do about this? Can you please confirm that that's true or not? And as a result of that, they then early afternoon, evening, released that information to say that there have been issues in Nicola's life. But we mustn't forget all of that. It is really important. It should have been released earlier. Nicola is still missing, and what we need to do is find her.
If the police are unable to ever explain what happened to her, where does that leave Lancashire Police?
Well, it leaves, first and foremost, the family in turmoil. They don't have Nicola, they can't mourn, they can't move on in that process, and of course her young children are in a position they never know what's happened to their mum. So that's the first and the most important thing. What it impacts on the Lancashire Police is that they need now to go right back to the very beginning in terms of their media strategy, externally look at it and go, do you know what, we got it completely wrong. Let's not make this mistake again. And it will happen, there will be other major investigations they have to deal with. Let's not make that mistake again, learn from it, put in place changes. And I think in terms of their back end element, what they mustn't do is become focused too early on one scenario.
Back to the investigation, the fact that the dog was walking between the bench and the gate, does that give us any indications where Nicola may have gone?
I think it is. I think it's really significant. It's only when you come to the scene that you actually understand, and that's why it's so important as an investigator always to come back to the scene. I call this a crime scene. That's how we talk about it. And what's really significant is the police have said it is unlikely, and their theory is that she hasn't left the area. But let's be very clear about that. It is impossible to say that. And I'll tell you why. Because the route in, which is across the bridge from where she left her car, down the path and through this gate here, is exactly the same route that she could have taken out of here, because there is no CCTV on any of this route. She could have left here either her own free will and got into perhaps a car, someone supporting her, or left on her own free will, and she would not have been seen. So for the police to say with certainty that she hasn't left the area is absolutely wrong. There are two scenarios here. One, she went in the water, but not here, much further downstream where it is tidal and where it's deeper, or she left on her own free will and she's either gone away from this area or she's fairly close nearby.
If you were leading the investigation now, how would you proceed in the next few days?
Well, I think there's a number of things. First of all, I'd talk to the family and I'd get Paul to give a press conference. I'd get Paul to talk to the public and open up his heart in terms of how difficult it's been for him and the family. And let's get some sympathy back for Nicola. She's gone through torment, as many people do in parts and times of their life. Let's get that back in tune. Let's stop calling her, people have alcohol dependency. It doesn't make them a bad person. What it means is they've got issues in their life. Let's get a press conference. Let's get Paul talking to the public. Let's get the public back on side. That's first and foremost. And so far as the investigation goes, what I would now do is I would move away from the water here. It's no relevance here. I think they've probably exhausted all the elements downstream, and if she ends up turning up, then we'll find her. I would put searches in the whole of the locality around here. I'd go back out and I'd start appealing to the public. Is there anybody there who's got another piece of information that could fill this jigsaw puzzle? Because if she is still alive, and there's a big if of course, sadly, if she is still alive, someone will be helping her.